was this morning to get up early and go and see some sunrise in the glen. I knew it was a bit of a risk, and I've had a look this morning and it's grey, it's overcast, it's windy, it's rainy. I think in Scotland they call it a bit dreich. So there's no point going up. I'm just going to get nothing at all, and it's going to be flat. And actually the weather report on Monday looks fantastic, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump forward and go and do a blog on Monday. But that does allow me to look back at some of my work, so this was a good opportunity to go and look back at a few images that I took over my years of photography. And I chose a theme, and the theme is going to be golden hour. So here's a few images from Glencoe in the golden hour. Okay, I've picked out a selection of golden hour shots I've taken over the years while being in Glencoe. I've been up here about 15 years now, and so some of these shots are quite old and obviously on older equipment, so sort of they're still not bad. And actually sometimes when you look at a photograph, it's a bit, you have a sort of a bit of a tied relationship with an image. When you take an image and you first view it on the camera and it just looks amazing, it's one of those sort of moments when you're completely bowled over by it. And then I think you work on it a bit, sometimes maybe too much, and then you just keep looking at it because you're sort of glutting on how great it was. And then after a period of time, you kind of fall out of friends with it, and then eventually you just look back and think, it looks a bit tired, or it weren't quite my style, or I could have done better. And it's a shame that journey you take with a photograph. You start off wow factor and eventually you just get fed up with it. And I think you have to get it in your head a little bit of, remember that moment when you took the image and it flashed up on your LCD screen and you went, wow, I've got a portfolio image here. This is absolutely stunning. So it's really important to remember that when you look at a shot, because even though you're probably bored with it, if somebody else views it, they will still get that initial wow factor, whereas you're a bit fed up with it. Let's look at this first image then. So this is quite an old image now. This is probably over 10 years old now. And I was shooting on a Nikon D90 at the time. And it was one of those sunrise moments when you just were absolutely bowled over by what was happening in front of you. And this is a good example of checking your settings before you start. And actually I'm quite gutted about this image, and I've managed to, with my better knowledge of Lightroom and Photoshop, managed to rescue this a little bit. But unfortunately at the time when I shot this shot, I'd got a client out with me the day before, and I was showing the client about ISO noise. So I'd cranked up my camera up to ISO 800 for some reason, and I hadn't turned it back down again, and I was gutted at this because this really was a shot which was one of those special moments. And that cap of cloud just come over, looks a bit like Donald Trump's hairdo actually, but this cap of cloud looking over the mountain, and then if you look to the left of this shot, the sunrise, the little gap in the clouds, and I didn't think it was going to happen. I really genuinely didn't think it was going to happen. And then just before sun popped up, this little gap in the clouds opened up, and lo and behold, this light just came stunning coming through on the left hand side, and it just lit up the whole of Buachalettiv Moor, as well as this beautiful cap of cloud, and the way it was rolling over it was just fantastic. Almost fairy tale, it really is. So if you zoom on into this, it is all grainy in the raw file, and that was simply because I hadn't got into a set workflow pattern when I was in the field. Nowadays I'm zooming in, I'm checking the focus, and I'm checking the histogram. But at the time with this shot, I was probably too busy, I was too excited, maybe got carried away, and I hadn't got that sort of natural workflow in the field. And if I'd only zoomed into this, I'd have seen at that moment in time the ISO was only 800, and I could have come back and cranked it back down to 100 or lower and got this nice crystal pin sharp photograph. So this shot is Lagengarv Cottage, and in fact I've got a few here of Lagengarv Cottage, and the sole reason for that is the actual orientation of Glencoe it does tend to get the sun at the top end, obviously, because it's rising in the east. So you do tend to get it in the east, and the orientation of Glencoe, it tends to put everything else in shadow further down the glen. So generally you need to be up somewhere a bit more exposed on Rannoch Moor or somewhere like that gives you that light. And obviously the buckle here is the great location for sunrise. And I've got a couple of shots coming up to show you how the golden hour works with sunrise. And okay, this next shot was taken probably maybe a few months before the previous shot, and as you can see, this is the beautiful autumn colours coming in now. And it's a very similar shot in that I got here at sunrise, must have been about October time, because the bracken is just beautiful that time of year. And I can't emphasise enough, come to Glencoe during the autumn. The colours are absolutely stunning. If you get a bit of light on that beautiful golden bracken, it is fantastic. So if you look at the shot itself, again, we've got that light coming in from the east, and it's lighting up this buckle here. Some lovely pink clouds in the sky as well. And as you go down to Lagengarv Cottage, there is in fact a little burn or a little river on the right hand side, and just across the burn is this bridge here. And what I did with this is I used that bridge as a leading line, and that really did lead the eye to the cottage. And it gives me a lot of foreground interest as well with this beautiful old wood that's very distressed. And I may have made it look a bit more distressed in post-process in Photoshop. But it's a beautiful bridge crossing the burn here, and then as you can see, all the ling heather here is absolutely just gone. It's just going over a little bit, I can see now, but it's still got that pink colour to it, so it must be maybe late September here. And then I've got the burn coming down the right hand side, and then it does actually sort of veer off and head toward the cottage, but you don't actually see that, I'm afraid. I've got a wide angle lens on here, and that's giving me that distortion, and that's giving me that sort of dominance of the bridge coming across, and all the little logs, and they all kind of lead the eye to the cottage. This one, I like this shot because it deliberately breaks the rule of thirds, and I'm not a big fan of the rule of thirds. It works in certain places, but it's not necessarily the only form of composition. And no doubt in the future I'm probably going to do a video on composition, and I'll show you a few techniques later on. But for now, you can see that the cottage is actually pretty much plumb in the middle, breaks all the rules. And some people would hate it, the fact that it breaks the rules, but actually I quite like it. I quite like the fact that the cottage is bang in the middle. I think I'm sort of deliberately putting up two fingers to the composition rules, and I like that. The colours themselves are absolutely out of this world, and yeah, I've oversaturated this a little bit, and that was at the time, that's what was all on vogue. But honestly, sometimes if you're in Glencoe, sometimes them colours are pretty spectacular. They are pretty spectacular, and it's worth. It's kind of, sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, you've oversaturated that," and you're like, "Actually, I didn't. I was there, and it was just so vibrant with those golden lights." So please come up to Glencoe in autumn, because it is an absolutely amazing place. Late September, October, it's always a bit of a risk with the weather, but if you get a glorious day in October, then you're guaranteed some absolutely beautiful photographs of Glencoe. I'm going to pick another shot that works quite well of Lagengarv Cottage, and I'm going to come into that sunrise again, and there's the cottage again in the corner here, and like I say, so that top end of the glen, you're really guaranteed, if you're going to get some light coming in, you're guaranteed a sunrise. And this must be relatively early on. I reckon this might be maybe August time this shot was taken, and the reason being is I can just see late August, maybe early September. The fact is the sun is so far over to the left, and during the year, it's amazing how far this sun rises, how the difference is. And at this time of year, I'm talking about sort of January, we're actually early February right now, and it's starting to come back a little bit, but it's quite a far way over now at the moment for sunrise. And at this time of year, it was a good way over. So what I've got is I've obviously closed down, so I must be about an f16 on this one or something like that, just to get those light rays. And actually now I look at it, I always wish I'd see that little dot there, that little glare, that flare in the lens. I find that a little bit distracting, and maybe I should just sort of edit that out. But yeah, I find that distracting. So the shot itself, again, I've broke a lot of the rules because the horizon is pretty much just slightly higher. Yeah, it's slightly higher than halfway. And I think the reason for that was that the sky was so fantastic. It was absolutely beautiful. And I'm like, right, I need this foreground heather in to give some depth to the photographs and to give it that almost 3 dimensions. So what I've done is I've broke the rules again a little bit, because actually with this shot I've pretty much got the horizon nearly in the middle of the shot. And I think it was because I was in a tug of war between, do I get rid of the foreground? Do I get rid of the sky? And they were both, this tug of war between the two, but they were both so fantastic. I really didn't want to lose anything. And in the end, I compromised with the traditional rule of thirds and all these kind of things. And I kind of just went for the shot that worked for both. And I was greedy and wanted it all. I think nowadays I've got a 16 to 35 full frame camera. Probably I would have got a bit lower and then reduced the distance between this section here. And that would have been a better shot. But at the time, you've got the kit you've got. You know, this is 10 years ago. Again, I was on the D90. I only had what kit I had in the bag, and that was it. But yeah, nowadays I would probably come quite low and look down over that heather. And what that would do is then get a bit lower, and that would reduce this gap here between this sort of bland area to some extent, before the interesting stuff got here. And that would make it for a nice shot. But again, the light was great, the sky was fantastic, it was just fairy tale stuff. And yeah, it's not fantastically sharp, I suppose. It's not bad when you zoom in. But you know, I mean, I'm on a D90 here. This ain't 38 megapixels anymore. So you know, you do what you do at the time, and to get that from that old camera was fantastic. So I love Lagengarv Cottage. It does feature a lot, and I've got another one here for the next shot of Lagengarv Cottage. And the reason being is you've got this massive mantle of Byakuletiv Moor, and this cottage really does give you that perspective. Okay, so let's have a look at this shot then. So this is Lagengarv Cottage the final time, and now we're looking at sunset. So we're obviously facing out to west now, and this is a great shot, and it's a cliche shot, and I don't mind it's a cliche shot. I think you should go and shoot the cliche shots. Glencoe has been shot to death, and yeah, so what, you go online and you'll see 1 million photographs of Lagengarv Cottage. Who cares? The light is amazing, the composition works, and that's why these shots are so popular. And why can't you get that wow factor when you look at this shot? It's not, you know, it's your turn to go and get it. So honestly, go and shoot the cliche shots. Yeah, go and find some stuff that's a bit out of the way, but God, definitely come up to Glencoe and shoot the cliche shots at all, because they are good shots, and the reason is they just work. And if you've got a shot that composition is absolute to perfection, and then you add that on with the light, then you cannot not shoot it just because it's been shot somewhere else. Because I guarantee 90% of these shots, yeah, they might be this similar, but no one has got a shot like this of Lagengarv Cottage. No one. So let's have a look at this shot here. In terms of composition, I think Lagengarv is the best in Glencoe. It just works really well. So I'm going to talk you through this image. So this is actually sunset, and I think actually what I did here is, this was obviously exceedingly bright, and I bracketed this one. So I think I spliced together 3 shots for exposure, because this area in particular was obviously where the sun is setting was quite strong. So in terms of composition first, let's have a look at that composition first. So we've got this lovely leading line of the River Kupel coming through the glen here, and that really is, it's nice and wide at the foreground, and it disappears off into the distance, and that gives you some depth, some foreground, and it just works really well. So that leading line is a classic. And actually there's a little compositional trick which I don't tend to see too much. It's not really counted too much, but I think it's really important. And this is this left to right guide. And you'll notice I'm using the word guide and not rule. Okay, these are just guides, they're not rules. But this left to right guide is quite interesting. In the West, we read from left to right. So actually, when we look at a photograph aesthetically, we always favour that left-hand side. And then subconsciously, we'll work our way over to the right. And this works for Lagengarv Cottage. And it is a cultural thing. I've had Muslims on my courses out with clients. And they obviously read right to left. And actually, they find this quite tricky. And they will recompose this shot from right to left, which is quite interesting. But that left to right, if you can find things that helps the eye move from left to right, aesthetically you'll find that more pleasing. And that's why this river does, your eye starts at this bottom left and it'll make that journey through the shot, popping off at the cottage here and then finishing possibly where the sun is setting or up on here on the wee Buckle Etive Baig. And it's a lovely shot for that. So that left to right and leading lines. You can get a bit closer down here. And if you do that, the only downside of getting close to sort of leading lines is you tend to lose the lead. So if you've got a bit of slight elevation, if you're slightly higher up a little bit, you get that sort of lead as the line goes off into the distance. So I try and avoid getting too low with this river because you do tend to lose the lead and it just becomes a mass of water and you don't get that sort of leading line. Good, so that works really well and I'm really pleased with this shot. And I think actually this is a good example of don't be careful what you delete, because I think what happened with this is I hadn't seen this shot very good. I think I'd taken it and I'd bracketed and I'd only was seeing the bracketed image in camera, and I think I left it because usually when you get a great shot you're like, right, I want to get this in and plug it into the camera, get it in, I want to see the computer, I want to have a look at it and see how great it is. And actually I think I left this a week on the thing, and that's because when I was looking on the LCD screen, because I hadn't got the bracketed actual shot or finished shot, I'd only got the bracketed images. One looked too dark, one was too bright, and I just thought, I've missed that, I don't think that's very good. And then I think a week later what I was doing was I was having a look at another image from a different shoot, and I picked this one up and I thought, oh, I'll have a play with this. So I picked up the three images, spliced them all together, and then this popped out and I was like, how did I leave this a week? What was I thinking? And it is just a stunning image. The light is coming great. I've got these lovely sort of rays of sun, and I just love how it kind of, you can see the mountain there being cut in half with the rays, and then obviously this sun is just hiding behind the peak of this area is probably what's giving me that shadow. And then this sort of cirrus cloud at the top here, these ice crystals in the sky, which are stunning, it really was. So it was a great shot. The river itself is normally I would pop a polarizer on this and polarize this, but in this shot I didn't, because I wanted that glare, I wanted that beautiful colour in the foreground, and this is what this river gave me here. So yeah, it's a wonderful shot. Well, thank you very much for watching, and if you could give me some feedback, I would like a bit more feedback with my videos. So just take the time, out of courtesy, just pop on down and give me a thumbs up, so then at least I know you like the videos. If you want to write any comments, too oversaturated, or I love the photos, or keep up the good work with the videos, it just gives me some feedback rather than just posting videos to nobody. So I would be most grateful if you could write a comment, and if you could subscribe, even better, I'd be most grateful. Okay, we'll see how we get on. I'm out on Monday. Let's go and do a shot on Monday, and hopefully we'll get some video footage of some beautiful light in Glencoe. Whoa.